And we're back on politics tonight. So a shift in attitude by top Democrats on Capitol Hill today. Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi now calling on longtime Congressman John Conyers to step down. 88-year-old Conyers is facing several public allegations that he sexually harassed a staffer. Over the weekend, Pelosi actually called Conyers an icon of the Democratic Party, refused to ask him to step down. But she did change her tune after one of Conyers' accusers detailed her encounters on the Today Show this morning. Marion Brown, she says Conyers touched her inappropriately, invited her into his hotel room right here in Chicago back in 2005 before propositioning her.
The allegations against Congressman Conyers, as we have learned more since Sunday, are serious, disappointing, and very credible. I pray for Congressman Conyers and his family and wish them well. However, Congressman Conyers should resign.
Well, the congressman is at home in Detroit. His lawyers say he's now recovering at a nearby hospital after experiencing dizziness and chest pains. Conyers' attorney also fiercely defending the lawmaker, saying there is no way to compare what he did to other stories coming out of Hollywood and beyond.
Other individuals have been fired immediately. Why wasn't the congressman forced to resign immediately? You're dealing with two different entities. In corporate America, there is no due process. John Conyers works for Congress, a judicial, a legal, a legislative branch of government. There, it is different.
Well, meanwhile, a fifth woman has come forward claiming that Senator Al Franken groped her. 41-year-old Army veteran Stephanie Kemplin says that Franken grabbed her breast during a photo on a USO tour back when he was still a comedian in 2003. She says he kept it there long enough that he should have known if it was an accident. Franken's spokesperson apologized, said the senator never intentionally engaged in this kind of conduct, and he is cooperating with a Senate ethics investigation. Few Democrats have called for Franken's resignation, however. While a slew of sexual harassment allegations swirl on Capitol Hill, politicians hardly being punished for the same behavior others have been fired for. Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey, Matt Lauer. Those in the news and entertainment industries have been shown the door after their misconduct became public knowledge. But in the world of politics, it is just harder to pin that stuff down. The accused of wrongdoing, still harder to purge them from their elected positions. Joining me tonight to discuss, an expert in this area, Professor Kimberly Whaley. She's at the University of Baltimore School of Law, also a former U.S. attorney, author of the forthcoming book, The Outsourced Constitution, How Public Power in Private Hands Erodes Democracy. And Professor, welcome to Politics Tonight.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So the setup couldn't be more clear, and I'll simply put the question to you. It's really strange. People talk about the power of Hollywood, but Hollywood's paying the price. The news media is paying the price. But thus far, politicians not paying the price. We put one guy with accusations in the White House.
That's right. So in Hollywood, there are bosses, there are shareholders, there are customers. And when there's bad publicity, there's a concern amongst the higher ups that it's going to be a problem for the company. And so these people are getting rapidly canned and banned without a lot of discussion as to whether the women's allegations are truthful or not. When it comes to government officials, at least at the federal level, the boss is the voters. The boss are the people in that particular constituency. And so until there's another election, there isn't a whole lot of direct accountability. There are two other options. One is under Article 1 of the Constitution, each House of Congress can move to expel a sitting member for misconduct, but that takes 2/3 majority, which is difficult to do. Or as we're seeing with Nancy Pelosi, there could just be pressure amongst other members of Congress for an individual to step down, which is happening with John Conyers right now.
And you know, where the Democrats are even taking heat with regard to Conyers or Franken, many of them are saying, you know, should he step down? Look, let's have a hearing. Let's see. And as though that's terrible. But the thing is, in the real world, you get due process. The question is, when you're in public office or maybe running for public office, Roy Moore, right, in Alabama, is there the same kind of due process concept? I don't think so.
Well, I mean, a due process is a constitutional concept, as you know, and that has to do with whether government's going to take away something that actually duly belongs to you. And in this instance, you know, these are jobs that are in place because the voters elect them into that office. So I'm not sure due process is the proper comparison here, and we're not talking about putting these people in jail. When it comes to Roy Moore, there, I must say, all this publicity coming out of Hollywood and coming out of New York City and things like that is probably making him pretty happy, because a lot of the pressure, or at least the media's focus, is not on that race, and that's one that I think people need to think long and hard about, because when someone is elected to Congress, not only is it hard to fire them, but they have powers that people like Harvey Weinstein and Matt Lauer do not.
You've written on this story, and one of the things you've said is, let's not forget that when it comes to Judge Roy Moore, he could be prosecuted, that in Alabama, the statute of limitations on doing what he's allegedly has done to people underage, it's limitless. They could go after him today if they wanted to, but you don't think they will.
Well, there's a little bit of ambiguity in that at the time of some of these allegations, there was a different statute of limitations in place. But certainly the statute of limitations represents today a reflection of the public's belief that this is the kind of crime that is unacceptable, and somebody, no matter when they are found guilty of that, should still go to jail. Whether it applies to him directly, I can't speak to that immediately, but it certainly, I think, is a reflection of the difference between the criminal justice system and putting someone in a tremendous position of power like a sitting senator. That's a different situation.
So, and by the way, let's go back to the Hollywood world or media world for just a little bit, because, listen, NBC could not have, well, it depends on who you believe, but it appears that NBC could not have acted more quickly with regard to Matt Lauer, in that they claimed they didn't know anything before 24 hours before they heard this. There's some question about that, but okay. But they acted quickly. Garrison Keillor, right? NPR making a very quick cut to him. Kevin Spacey, bye-bye, House of Cards and everything else you're doing. Louis C.K. Media and Hollywood people paying immediate price. When we talk about due concept, you mentioned that's about the government taking something away from you. Do any of these guys in losing, do they have any rights there? Is there due process, or you get to you're fired?
Well, no, because they're working for private companies, so the due process clause in the Constitution doesn't apply to these individuals' positions. They don't have a constitutional interest in maintaining that job. That being said, they are bound by, in certain circumstances, the same civil rights laws that bind Congress. It's just that Congress has applied its own rules for actually processing those claims, and that is also a major difference. So in the private sector, you can pretty quickly, after raising a complaint in an administrative context, go to court. For people on Congress that are working for members of Congress that are harassed, they've got to wait a full 3 months under the Congress's own rules for bringing these kinds of claims before they can even lodge something. So in Congress, for sure, as compared to the private sector, when you're talking about the statute that governs sexual discrimination, it's a lot tougher. It's a lot tougher for the complainant.
Now, a lot of people talk about Bill Clinton, but you could put Bill Clinton almost in a category with Trump and Franken in terms of in these politicians. I actually want to bring back something that's from your bailiwick. You are a professor of constitutional law, Kim. Clarence Thomas. Let's go back to the Thomas hearings where Anita Hill, now a professor, said, that he did all these things. And of course, she was just, nobody believed her and whatever. Socratically, I'll put this question out to you. If Clarence Thomas was nominated to the Supreme Court today, would he be sitting there?
Well, I do think that we're in a new era where the Band-Aid's been ripped off on all of these things that have been kept undercover for a long time, or even when they're brought to light, as in my first teaching job was in University of Oklahoma. My colleagues knew Anita Hill personally, and that was a really dramatic assault on her credibility in that instance. And I remember being in law school actually at the time and saying, listen, we're not talking about putting Clarence Thomas in jail. This is about whether he sits on the Supreme Court of the United States. And there are lots of reasons we all apply for jobs and we don't get them. And that's really, I think, a primary distinction. But sure, I mean, what's happening right now as far as people acknowledging that this is a problem and holding these people accountable is historic, probably.
And just very quickly, we're about out of time, but some are calling this a tsunami in terms of the change in culture. Is that the way you see it?
I think so, and it's very interesting to see what happens now in the public sector, whether we're going to have different rules that govern Congress and whether the complainants are going to be taken seriously and actually see some reform. All right. Professor Kim Whaley at the University of Baltimore School of Law, and a former U.S. attorney, by the way. Thank you so much for joining us with that analysis. We're going to talk to you again soon. Happy to be here. Thank you. All right. Coming up next, Republicans in the Senate.